Hey everybody, something a little different today. I'm going to have to pray that you can hear me over the multiple fans in my room. It is of course October, and that means two things. First of all, another year gets knocked off my life expectancy, and second of all, it is hot as fuck. Anyway, instead of World of Tanks, today we got Red Orchestra 2, which has recently been updated. After 3 fucking years, Tripwire finally gave us the tanks they promised 6 months after release. This is the T-70. Those of you who play World of Tanks will recognise it as a Tier 3 light tank. You may notice something straight away. The commander's hatch is in my face and I cannot see a fucking thing. Welcome to the T-70. To actually see where you are going in this tank, since you can't lean around the hatch the way you would be able to in, say, armour or something with track IR enabled and 6 degrees of freedom, you have to actually traverse the turret off to the right side. Now I can see. T-70 is of course a light tank. It's pretty quick. In World of Tanks it's one of the slower light tanks, but it trades that for armour. And historically it wasn't a fast light tank. It wasn't intended so much for scouting as just simple infantry support. Soviet light tanks in general were used as light infantry support vehicles instead of scouts. If the Soviets wanted to scout, they would typically send infantry or scout cars. So, we've got a little 2-man tank, 45mm gun and a DT machine gun. We're up against Panzer 3Ms and 4Gs. Let's see what we can do. Probably not much. This is of course a remake of the RO1 map Arad. Oh shit, there is a tank already. Welcome to the T-70. You are the commander, the gunner and the loader all in one. And so it is your job to serve as a 45mm gun. Now before we get the shit blown out of us by these big scary German tanks, I'm actually going to withdraw back into this trench. Fuck. So I can show you a little more about this tank. The interior is extremely Spartan, as only a Soviet tank could be. If I pull back just a little further, I should be safe. It's obviously quite small. It's a tiny little tank. For those of you... Fuck, it's chasing me. For those of you who've seen the Su-76, it's actually based off of the chassis of this light tank. That's why they look similar. And there we go. One of them is down. It's a Panzer 3 in front of us. I'm hoping... Yep, my team took care of him, so I can show you guys around. Right. This is the turret. It is a 1-man turret. Behind you is a radio. It's much simpler than the T-34 turret. The traverse is by hand wheel. There is no electric or hydraulic traverse system. The elevation of the gun is actually by hand. I can't really show you it, but there is no elevation hand wheel. You simply aim the gun using the pistol grip on the DT machine gun. This is the hatch above us. The only periscope is the panoramic sight, which is right in front. If it will let me actually look through it, which it isn't for some reason, but that's mounted in the hatch. Typical of Soviet tanks, they had panoramic periscopes. German tanks typically had actual just normal periscopes or episcopes or whatever you want to call them, arrayed around the turret where the actual little pads are on this, presumably to stop you bashing your head on the hatch. Driver's in front of us. There's a DT mags on his left, fire extinguisher in front of him, like a document case or something. Keep traversing. These are the engines. 2 engines actually in the T-70. I believe they were car engines or truck engines or something, built by Gaz, which is the Gorky automobile plant, I think. Ensign Expendable would know this better than I would. Anyway, we have our direct vision telescope to the left of the DT under the periscope, and then I think that's actually a radio there as well, or an intercom or something, and the 45mm gun. Very small gun. Ammo stowage is at my feet and actually traverses with the turret. So this thing has a turret basket of sorts. Pop my head out and see what's going on. We'll actually take it into a bit of a fight. looks like we're clear for now, and so we'll push ahead. Oh, that's what I was going to do. I'll show you the driver's position from his perspective. Here we go. So that's a transmission there. 2 engines, transmission, and then that's the brakes, and that runs out to the final drives. Got some of your instruments there. Instrument panel in front of you. Little front hatch opens up, much like a miniature version of the one on the T-34. And you've just got your direct vision there. Actually, that may be a cold weather starter, not a fire extinguisher, I'm not sure. And you can see the gun behind, and I think my tank is taking hits here because I'm being charged by an angry German. Yep, of course this thing is clutch and brake steering, so it is not the most pleasant to drive. And I cannot see a fucking thing. Again, this is the T-70. It has horrible visibility. You cannot see what is going on outside unless you use the panoramic sight or pop your head out. And the panoramic sight is obviously magnified, so if something is right in front of you, you're going to have trouble seeing it. Let's see if we can pop this guy's commander. And there we go. We have to load our own rounds. And we have 2 kinds of AP rounds. I'm guessing one of them is APCR. And for some reason my controls are changed. I will be right back, I've got to fix it. Okay, sorry about that. It turns out that adding to the list of problems with this game, you actually have to reconfigure controls when you play workshop maps in single player. Oh, and these are in fact HE rounds, they just display as AP for some reason. Again, this is tripwire we're talking about. It can't be expected to actually work properly. From what I recall, the majority of work on these new tanks was done by people other than Tripwire employees. Tripwire simply added them to the game. So they're technically not even delivering on their fucking promise. But I will say the new tanks are actually decently done other than the glitches. And so, I mean, an update to this game that adds what's promised is better than nothing. As in World of Tanks, the T-70 has surprisingly sturdy armor for a light tank, particularly one so small. We just beasted a Panzer III in a frontal engagement. I wouldn't rely on that. So let's go find something else to kill, and then once I get killed in this, I will switch to a Panzer III, so you can see that. I've already done videos on the Panzer IV and T-34, I will link them in the description. They don't have voiceover, they're just using annotations, which are probably broken, knowing YouTube. Constantly breaks annotations every time they change their layout, but you should be able to at least recognize some of the basics, what they are. If not, just comment on the video to let me know that it's busted or whatever. I'll do what I can to fix it. And there we go, there's another enemy. Hand-wheel traverse, not the fastest thing in the world. He's noticed us. And there goes our driver. And there is blood everywhere, transmission's fucked. Left track's damaged. I don't think I'm going to survive this one. Yeah. So let's switch teams and try out the Panzer IIIM. Fuck the MKB and everyone who uses it. There we go. Panzer IIIM. As you can see, it is a late model Panzer III with the long 5cm gun, the KWK-39L60, I think it is. It has the spaced armor on the gun mantle and the front hull, which adds up to about 80mm frontal armor, which is quite good, considering how early on this was. Good view from the commander's cupola, as you would expect. And if we duck inside, again, it's a full German cupola. It has periscopes on all sides. You can see quite happily around you. Loader on the right, gunner on the left. gun breech right in front. Obviously the gun's not too big, so you can place the commander behind it, behind the recoil cage. Let's see where we are. Now we got miles to go before we run into any enemies. As you can see, they also added the PzKpfw half-track and the universal carrier. I'm not going to show these in this video, not much point. They're basically the same as they were in RO1. There's really not much been changed. In fact, I believe parts of the models were ordered from RO1. A lot of the stuff in this is kind of janky. Because, as I said, I believe a lot of it was done by people other than Tripwire, and Tripwire just kind of cobbled it together to throw in the update. Better late than never, I suppose, and with the Immersion Overhaul Mutator, which is available on Steam and also on the Tripwire forums, the game actually does play a lot like RO1, which is to say like it should have in the first place. So it's not totally irredeemable, but the problem is the Overhaul Mutator needs more active servers. It also still has some things to sort out. Obviously it is community made, and so it's not going to be perfect. There's a T-70. Let's actually take control of our gunner. And get the shit blown out of us. I didn't turn my front enough to him. Oh well. As you can see, the Panzer III actually has spare track links slotted in along the sides of the hull, which is interesting. It makes for additional armor, I suppose. Well, somewhat. The issue of normalization won't be a thing because it's normal to the shells anyway. It's got all the spare equipment on the outside. It's not a bad looking little model, except for the fact that the art style is kind of inconsistent with a lot of the other stuff in the game. One of my big criticisms of RO2 art-wise actually is that a lot of it is done in a strange way. It looks like a lot of the Tripwire artists don't know how to do current gen texturing, and so they try and bake lighting into the diffuse map, which is something you would have done a long time ago. It's kind of not now. But on the other hand, you have things where they overdo the lighting on the diffuse, and then you've got things where they don't do lighting on the diffuse, not even AOs. And so that also looks retarded because it's totally flat. But again, I mean, graphics aren't the most important thing, gameplay is, and if Tripwire delivered on that, I wouldn't have any complaints. With that said, the game can be very pretty, particularly some of the better done maps. Rising Storm maps in particular tend to have very nice lighting on them. So it's not necessarily a bad looking game, it just needs a little bit of polish, which it will probably never get, unfortunately. Get cut off by our teammates on the bridge, how rude. As you can see, the Panzer IV is a bit bigger than this thing. So anyway, as I drive towards the enemy, I'll slow down a bit so I can show you the interior of this tank. We will take the gunner's position. Got your standard sort of German gun sight. I really like these sights, where it's just got the wheel around the outside for range setting. It's really, really nice. Keeps the reticle clear. The Soviet reticles, particularly on things like the T-34, are a bit too busy for me. It's just, there's shit everywhere. I mean, I have no doubt they're functional, it's just they're very cluttered. Anyway, let's pop out of the actual gun sight and take a look around. It's similar to the Panzer IV interior, but a bit smaller. It's pretty cozy. You've got your traverse hand wheel. No power traverse on this either. And you've got your elevation hand wheel on the left, but you can't actually elevate the gun while not in the gun sight, so I can't show you that. Over to the right side, we've got the loader behind the MG34, and the commander is sitting there behind us. That's where we just were. And so if I actually traverse this around, I'll show you the different stuff stowed around the inside of the hull. So obviously the side hatch. Turn the turret behind us and look down. That's the driver's back, you can see there. Storage cabinets. keep the tank organized. Ammunition, mostly. It's not just scattered willy-nilly around the place, it's actually kept in cupboards, which seems a little luxurious, but then again the crew do have to live in here. More ammunition. Ammo for the hull gun there, and there's the radio man and hull MG operator with the transmission in between him and the driver. Taking a bit more of a look around the inside of the turret itself. We've got an air vent there. It's a fuse box behind us, I believe, and fuse boxes in front as well. The radio is of course in the hull, as with most German tanks of World War II. The gunner, as well as having the telescopic sight here, I'm going to have to keep recording, also has the direct vision to the side of it, as he does in the Panzer IV. Now the problem with following German tanks, particularly the Panther, is that the gunner didn't have some way of direct vision in front of him. He only had the magnified sight. And so if there was a target directly in front of him at close range, he would have trouble laying the gun onto it, and also if the commander was trying to refer him onto a target, he would have trouble acquiring it, because the commander was able to see it just with his eyes, and the gunner was trying to look through a magnified sight. It's like trying to find something right in front of you with a pair of binoculars. It's really difficult. While I wait for the map to load again, having had to quit out and start over, I'll just go on a little more about the Panzer III. Now, the Panzer III was arguably the best tank the Germans produced during World War II. It was well laid out in the interior. It had passable armor for the time, and it could take up armoring quite well. It had a very good torsion bar suspension. Really, the Panzer III's biggest problem was its small turret ring. Because it had a narrow hull compared to the Panzer IV, it had a much smaller turret ring, and it couldn't take an upgun as readily. The turret ring is a function of how much you can outgun something, because obviously you have recoil forces to consider. You also have just the length and size of the gun. And so when it came time to actually put a 75mm long-barreled gun in a tank, it wouldn't fit in the Panzer III. It could only fit in the Panzer IV, which had a larger turret ring, but in turn had its own problems, namely that it had a shitty suspension, which could not take the weight of extra armor or an even larger gun. So the Germans ended up with a bizarre situation where the Panzer III, which had started as their sort of main anti-tank, so to speak, while the Panzer IV was more of an infantry support vehicle, they ended up with this situation where that reversed, and the Panzer IV became the anti-tank tank, and the Panzer III became the infantry support vehicle, and fuck knows why the graphics have set themselves to this setting. Red Orchestra 2, friends, fucking buggy as shit even 3 years after release. Let me figure out what is going on in here. Nothing, because my graphic settings are still cranked right up. Oh look, that fixed it. If you're gonna spend money on this game, wait for a sale. Or get it through somewhere that doesn't send the money to Tripwire. They honestly do not deserve money for this. Anyway, let's talk more about the actual tank. Yeah, so this ended up being more of an infantry support tank, replacing the 5cm gun with the 7.5cm L24, which was previously used on the Panzer IV early war to bust fortifications, kill infantry. So these things actually persisted until the end of the war, although production stopped in 1942 or 43, I can't remember which. After that, Panzer III hulls were, when sent back to the factory for overhaul, typically converted into Stug 3s, which were very useful, probably one of the best armoured vehicles of the war from a practicality and engineering standpoint. It was a very, very good vehicle, suited its purpose perfectly, easy to produce, easy to replace, wonderful vehicle. And it was just a Panzer III with the turret taken off and a casemate slapped on instead, so you could that was the only way to mount a larger gun to the Panzer III. Anyway, let's duck back inside. And let's actually take a look at the animations. So just like inside the other tanks in this game, you can actually see your crew reloading the guns and doing other things. You can also see them getting blown limb from limb when tank shells come through the side of your armor, which is not pleasant. And there we go, the loader's reloading the MG34 as well. How about that? Let's take a look down in the hull. Just before I do, we've got our little traverse indicator there. Oh, that's right, I didn't traverse all the way around. Nope, I did. I have a terrible short-term memory. There's the direct vision sight, as I said. So it doesn't work so well in RO2 because you can't press your face up into it, but obviously in the real tank you'll be able to duck your head down and press up into it, see what's going on. The Panzer IV has something similar, but it's usually partially obscured by an armoured hatch. So let's go to the driver's position. He's got a little periscope here, so he can drive like that. Now in RO1 you could actually lean forwards in some really odd way and pop your head out of the hatch. Now there's no hatch above you, just a head pad. The actual hatch, escape hatch, whatever you want to call it, is in front of the driver, above the above the brakes, transmission, whatever. Presumably the driver and radio operator would exit and leave the tank, assuming it wasn't on fire, by simply climbing up under the gun and out the turret. In fact, even if it was on fire, I suspect that's what they do. The reason for this is because you would fucking break your back trying to get under there and then out the front hatch. I think it was more or less just an access hatch to do repairs or get shit in the front here. Maybe an emergency hatch, but it's... I mean, look at that. That's cramped as shit. You wouldn't be able to get through there. Got your spare ammo for the radio man there. The case catcher for the gun, the loader's legs.
We have lost this battle, but victory will be ours again.
It would be nice if I could just actually show you the inside of the tank without the battle progressing, but RO2.
Greift den Feind an, Männer! Denkt an euren Auftrag! Für den Ruhm!
Anyway, back into the driver's position, we've got more MG ammo there. Those are the ammunition storage bins behind us, obviously, and the gunner's feet. This, I am not actually sure what that is. I think it's the turret traverse indicator. I'm pretty sure it is, actually. So the driver can tell where the turret's pointing. You've got little vision ports out to the side, so you have at least some sideways visibility, and then, yeah, obviously that. Clutch and brake steering. There's your revs. That's your speed, oil pressure, and oil temp. I think. I could be wrong. And obviously the resolution's not good enough to read them. So anyway, having done my little spiel about the driver's position, let's jump over to... That's not it. Here we go. Radio man's position. We've got an MG34 here with a 4-power sight. We've got our little window to the side so he can see what's going on to the right side of the tank. Radios, more radios, and I suppose that would include things like code books or you know, whatever, crew's personal effects, and your med kit there behind. And lots of ammo. Again, the hatch is down actually in a place it would be fucking impossible for him to get to, about where that radio is. And there's the turret from in front. As MG34, of course, as with the other stuff in the tank, does have reload animations. If I just fire off a whole belt, you'll be able to see. It also still has the single fire capability of course, it's an MG34, it still has the weirdo dual trigger. But it's still available for use in the tank, which is neat. Anyway, with all of that said, that's the Panzer III. Let's go do some fighting. It's very, very similar in design to the Panzer IV. It's just a slightly better engineered vehicle, better designed, and honestly, I like it better. It looks better. And as we all know, looks are everything. Sounds like there's a fight going on over there because I can hear shells bouncing from across the map because tripwire. As you can tell, I'm not the biggest fan of tripwire interactive anymore. I used to be when they made RO1 and it was my favourite game ever. Not so much now that RO2 is a clusterfuck and is still broken 3 years later. It's a T-70. And this 5cm gun does not handle T-70s well, and I'm going to have to call it there because I'm getting sick of restarting the game. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this little look into the tanks. If you're a World of Tanks player, that will no doubt give you a little bit of perspective on what they're like inside, at least until the Chieftain gets around to jumping in a real one. And for those of you who own a T-70, be glad you're driving it from a third-person perspective and you're not actually in it. Anyway, thanks for watching. As ever, there will be more World of Tanks videos, maybe some other stuff. Well, certainly some other stuff. Probably not much Red Orchestra, I would imagine. Not anymore. Thanks for watching. I wish you the best, and I will see you next time.